I now call Stuart Stevenson. Minister, you have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. It's often been said you can never have too much of a good thing. Let me start by thanking Parliament for the contributions that have been made right across the Chamber. It has genuinely, I think, been a debate where there has been a large measure of agreement, if not unanimity. Nonetheless, there are quite a lot of substantive points that have been raised by members that I will attempt to deal with as many as I can in my concluding remarks here. Those that I do not deal with in my concluding remarks, nonetheless, we will review everything that's been said in the Parliament. Peter Peacock in particular asked if I could respond on anything I didn't deal with in my summing up by writing to him. I'm happy to do that. If anyone else wishes me to proceed on that basis, I'm happy to interact with them in a similar way in what I hope is a consensual and inclusive manner. Let's put this in context. It is about taking forward the spatial aspects of the government's economic strategy, about fleshing out a number of our commitments on climate change, renewable energy and waste management, and of course setting a long-term vision for the spatial dimension and giving the opportunity to align strategic investment. So let me just turn to some of the points that have been raised. A number of members, starting with the committee convener, Duncan McNeill, Presiding Officer, raised the issue of consultation. And let me absolutely acknowledge that there are lessons that can be learned from every time that we interact with the people whom we serve, and we will seek to do that. I would make the very general point that I think it's one of the few occasions where governments have sought to contact every single community council in Scotland, statutory bodies, I accept, but nonetheless we had very substantial engagement indeed. Duncan McNeill also asked for a debrief of inputs, and that is something which I think is proper for us to consider. The framework needs to be more flexible. I just would wish to make the point that there are 12 projects in the framework, 4 of which are public sector, 8 of which are private sector. So to some extent what we're doing is creating a spatial framework for the way forward, but they ain't by and large our projects. Others will have to progress them. Will we give the priority that's appropriate to each of these projects as they come forward? Yes, of course we shall. And in relation to those projects for which we ourselves are responsible, we've given pretty clear indications on the Forth Crossing, the West of Scotland rail enhancements, the strategic drainage in Glasgow, and of course the 2014 Commonwealth Games. So I think the timetable for our projects is relatively well understood. Des McNulty talked about finance and timing. Perfectly proper to raise that, but of course it is a planning document, and as such it would be rather unusual to talk about finance. We will deal with that in another way. He also focused on the West of Scotland train infrastructure. I agree with him. It's right it's in here. And the reason it's right it's in here because to deliver the infrastructure, to include high-speed rail, but also the additional capacity we want in the West of Scotland, will require quite significant and major infrastructure changes in the Glasgow area. And that's why it has to be there. He also made a plea, as others did, for more reference to cycling, walking and indeed microgeneration. We'll certainly see if the text of the final document can pick up these comments. He suggested a lack of opportunity to discuss. Well, I suspect we would never run out of a feeling that we had more to say on what is a very major subject. Alison McInnes picked up on the North East expertise in carbon capture and, of course, the geographic advantage that there is, in particular, for the power station in our shared constituency at Peterhead, and that being adjacent to the Miller field, which is the sour gas field, and thus particularly appropriate because of the nature of the pipework for the sequestration of carbon dioxide. Malcolm Chisholm, not Malcolm Rifkin, as one of my colleagues inadvertently referred to him to my alarm. made a number of points. I think I would make a very general point, that many of the things of which he has concern, of course, are matters that are already engaged in the planning system. The lock gates at Leith he threw in. Well, I've got to bring my family into every debate, it's compulsory. My grandfather, Alexander McGregor, was actually a lock gatekeeper at Leith, so I may know more about it than Malcolm Chisholm imagined. He referred to Claire Simmons and her interview with the 11 people who were involved in the consultation. I think we have to give weight to what she said, because it was, of course, augmented by further research, but we do have to recognise that thousands of people were involved in the consultation. Alec Johnson, among others, made reference to high-speed rail. There are several hundreds of flights a day between central Scotland and London. Everywhere high-speed rail comes in, we see the withering of such flights, and I suspect we would be no different in that respect. I really don't have time, sorry. Rob Gibson said that the report was inevitably imperfect. Well, let me simply say, better to aim for perfection and miss rather than aim for mediocrity and hit it bang on. So, while not accepting that it is imperfect, we will always seek to do better. I see that got you, Cabinet Secretary, that particular one. He talked about Pentland Power, very important. Peter Peacock, wide range of issues, and I think I will have to respond to some in writing. Scapa Flow, very, very important. The Cromarty Firth, he made some interesting points. A96, I think it's important to supplement what I said in oral answer earlier today. The existence of a reference to Tornagrain does not short-circuit the planning process, because it is not designated as a national development. It will look at everything that has been said on the issue. If it's very brief indeed.
It will be almost as brief as your reply to me this afternoon. Given that I got a one-word reply answering yes, can I seek further clarity in writing from the Minister about Tornagrain?
If you wish, I'm happy to do that, and we'll pursue that later. Shirley-Ann Somerville said no second runway at Edinburgh. Well, we'll see, but we don't provide for it in this planning framework. Patrick Harvey said the replacement crossing, the second bridge, is a road only. No, it's not. We've designed the hard shoulders for future use in other ways. High-speed rail, Ian Smith referred to, certainly happy to think about. I think we've had huge consultation on what is a very interesting document. We've had a terrific debate. Jim Tolson managed to make a contribution to the debate similar to his previous one when he said 1 day's notice of the discussion draft, actually published in January 2008, a year ago. Like the STPR, it hasn't been a slim consultation. Ladies and gentlemen, Presiding Officer, I thank the three committees. I look forward with interest to how we vote at 5 o'clock.